But what is happening in your brain when you dream? How can you have bizarre dreams where you're running from witches, or flying to work, or having coffee with your childhood teddy bear? And why do they seem so real even though you know they're not? Well, it turns out there's a lot more going on in your head than you might think. So here's what science has discovered about the secret language of your subconscious mind, and the reason that every night you go to this wild place between wakefulness and sleep. There are different stages of sleep, which scientists have categorized into 4 distinct types. When we first go to bed, we enter stage 1, which is a light sleep marked by slow eye movements under closed eyelids. This lasts for about 20 minutes and is followed by stage 2, during which our heartbeat and breathing slow down even more. Most of the time we spend sleeping is taken up by these 2 stages. But the fun begins with stage 3, which is deep sleep. It's hard to wake someone who's in stage 3, and if you did, they wouldn't remember doing so. Deaths, because brain activity during this phase is what's known as slow-wave sleep. It's characterized by the presence of very slow delta brainwaves, hence the name. And this is when most of our dreaming occurs. That's right, dreaming is actually something that happens mostly during deep sleep, not just when you're drifting off. And you usually progress through the stages multiple times per night, getting deeper and deeper into stage 3, until finally your brain reaches the 4th and final stage, which is rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. This is when things get strange. Your eyes dart around under your eyelids, and although your muscles are still, your brain is working overtime. In fact, brain activity during REM sleep is almost identical to when you're wide awake. This is also when your heart rate and breathing become rapid and irregular. And if you were to be woken up during this phase, you would probably report that you were having a dream. As you may have noticed, our dreams aren't usually very logical. Sometimes they make sense, but often they involve impossibilities, like walking on water, or talking with a dog who tells you that he's really a squirrel. So why does our brain take us to such a strange place at night? Well, we don't know exactly, but we have some ideas. For one thing, dreams allow our brains to process difficult emotions. Psychologists theorize that dreams function as a kind of mental therapy, helping us cope with anxiety by providing a safe outlet for our emotions. This is supported by research showing that people who have more nightmares tend to have higher levels of psychological distress. But it's not just negative feelings that we can work through in our dreams. A study published in the journal Emotion found that participants who had pleasant dreams reported increased positive emotions the following day. So dreaming may help us process positive emotions, too. This is thought to be related to the role that dreams play in memory consolidation, since research has found that people who dream more are better able to remember their long-term goals. By helping us process our emotions and consolidate memories, dreams may help us become more mentally resilient. But that's not all. Dreams may also play an important role in our physical health. Research has found that people who dream more are more likely to come up with creative solutions to problems. They're also more flexible and open-minded. In other words, dreaming may help us think outside the box. One study even found that people who dreamed more were more likely to be physically healthy. So it seems that dreaming is good for our minds and bodies. But what about those bizarre scenarios that we find ourselves in when we dream? Well, it turns out that our brains are capable of creating some pretty wild stories. That's because the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for rational thought and decision-making, shuts down during REM sleep. Without the prefrontal cortex's help, our brains are free to explore whatever strange and wonderful worlds they can imagine. This is also why our dreams often feel so fragmented and illogical. The prefrontal cortex is also responsible for helping us string together coherent sentences and thoughts. Without it, we're left with a jumble of images and ideas that make little sense. But sometimes these jumbled dreams can make perfect sense, especially when they warn us of danger. It's thought that nightmares and disturbing dreams may have evolved as a kind of alarm system to alert us to potential threats. For example, a study published in the journal PNAS found that people who had been previously traumatized were more likely to dream about being chased, attacked, or otherwise harmed. These dreams may have served as a way for our ancestors to prepare for potential dangers. By simulating threatening situations, our brains may have been able to prime our bodies to fight or flight in the event of an actual attack. This is supported by research showing that people who have more nightmares are more likely to live in dangerous environments. So, it seems that our dreams may actually help keep us safe, too. Okay, so we know that dreams can help us process our emotions, consolidate our memories, and keep us safe. But why do they seem so real? After all, when we're dreaming, we're not actually interacting with the world around us. So how come our brains can't tell the difference between a dream and reality? Well, it turns out that our brains are really good at tricking themselves. That's because when we dream, our brains release chemicals that make us feel like we're experiencing what's happening in our dreams. For example, our brains release dopamine, which makes us feel pleasured, and adrenaline, which makes us feel afraid or excited. This is why we often laugh or cry while we're dreaming, even though nothing is actually funny or sad. It's also why we sometimes sweat or thrash around in our sleep. Our brains are literally trying to make us feel like we're in another world. But sometimes these feelings can be so intense that we end up acting them out, which can lead to something called dream enactment disorder. This is a condition in which people physically act out their dreams, sometimes causing injury to themselves or others. For example, in 2014, a woman in South Korea killed her husband while acting out a violent dream. In another case, a man in Italy fractured his arm after punching a wall during a nightmare. Dream enactment disorder is rare, but it shows just how powerful our brains can be when we're sleeping. Now, it's not just our emotions that our brains trick us into feeling while we're dreaming. Our senses are also affected. In fact, scientists have found that we can experience all of our senses while we're dreaming, including our sense of touch, smell, and even taste. This is why we sometimes feel like we're touching something or smelling something while we're asleep, even though we're not. Our brains are simply simulating these sensations, so that we feel like we're in another world. But there is one sense that we don't seem to be able to experience in our dreams, and that's our sense of hearing. In fact, scientists have never recorded a single case of someone dreaming while they were awake. It seems like our brains simply shut down our sense of hearing when we re-dreaming, so that we won't be distracted by the sounds around us. This makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint, since our ancestors would have been more likely to survive if they weren't woken up by random noises while they were sleeping. So we know that dreams can be vivid and realistic, but why do they always seem to end abruptly? That's because our brains use something called the reticular activating system to monitor our effect. If the reticular activating system detects any potentially dangerous stimuli, it will trigger a response in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes fear. This causes us to wake up suddenly, and that's why we sometimes wake up from a bad dream. But the abrupt ending to our dreams isn't just a matter of survival. It also helps us to consolidate our memories. That's because when we wake up from a dream, our brains process what we experienced while we were dreaming. This helps us to remember our dreams better, and it also helps us to distinguish our dreams from reality. So dreaming is a complex and fascinating process that serves a variety of important functions. It helps us process our emotions, consolidate our memories, keep us safe, and even trick us into thinking we're in another world. So next time you wake up from a weird dream, just remember that your brain was hard at work keeping you alive and thriving. Now check out the weirdest things ever found in the human body. Or watch this video instead.